great to welcome now in our Book Talk segment. We're going to talk about a very interesting book about a very interesting woman. It's called Lab Girl, and it's been a great bestseller, now out in paperback, about her experiences as a geobiologist. And we'll find out about it right now. And we're joined by Hope Jahren. She's on the telephone today up in New York as we talk this afternoon. And Hope, good to talk with you. How are you?
Just fine. Thank you for having me.
How are things in New York, by the way? That's where I grew up. Is it decent weather?
Oh, yeah? It is gray and rainy, but spring is about to happen, and you can tell people are more than ready for it.
You always waited for that one day in March when it would get warm again, but it's not quite there yet, I guess.
It's not green, and, it's a really interesting time for a plant biologist because, and you might not notice this, but if you're not a biologist, but it's spring is about to spring, and nobody wants to be the first green leaf out there, but nobody wants to be the last. So there's this kind of weird jockeying for position that's happening among the plants. Everybody's waiting, for the first one to stick their toe in the water, and then things are going to start happening really fast. So I just love this. You can feel the tension in the air.
Well, there's always, like you look forward to that up there. Then it would get warm for a couple of days, and then it'll get freezing for a few. So you're never quite sure in March. But April, I guess, is when it really kicks in, right? Spring up there in the north.
Well, I grew up in Minnesota, where you could still get a good blizzard in May, occasionally. Right. By the time the snow, you get a few good days above freezing, and the plants perk up, and sometimes they jump in, even if it's not a good idea, and start growing.
Well, that kind of made this book interesting to me when Donna made it available for me to read, and then obviously to have you on the show. I've always been interested in science, and particularly in plants and all that. And that's kind of been your life, studying plants and trees, and I guess that's a little bit unusual for a woman to go into that. Am I right about that?
Well, there's a lot of things that need done in the world, and not everybody can study plants.
Right.
So when you're a person who's done almost nothing else for a few decades, you end up with some pretty unusual stories to tell. Now, it's up to people whether they think those stories are worth hearing, but I did find myself in a position where I thought, I should write this stuff down. I guess maybe all books start that way.
Sure.
But it's been really a great joy to have people respond and say, wow, this is what the life of a scientist is really like. And I can say that's how we've lived it. We're people. We have all the glorious flaws and strengths of anybody trying their best in a really hard job that isn't much fun sometimes and is the most incredible fun at other times. And so it's been a wonderful thing to share stories and have people from other walks of life say, hey, that sounds like something really interesting. And it's been a wonderful opening of doors in my own life.
Well, you hear the term, research scientist, and it sounds like it's a glamorous thing when of course, you discover something and all that. But there's a lot of time there where you're doing a lot of experiments and nothing really happens. So I guess that's the downside of it. Not the downside of it, but the tough part of the job, right?
Well, some questions take an awful long time to answer.
Right.
And, in research, if we knew the answer, we wouldn't need to do the work, right? And so if you knew what was going to happen, it would be off making something. It wouldn't be in the realm of research. So there's a lot of times where we work really hard and we're not on the right track, but we don't realize it. And so there is an awful lot of stuff that all comes to nothing, but you don't know that unless you do it. And so there's this weird kind of, we work really hard, but in a certain other way, we have to kind of keep the faith that if we do enough of it, something good will come of it. But we have pretty low expectations that what we're doing at any given moment is going to be a huge breakthrough. But then again, big things do happen. And you've got to show up every day for years for that one magic moment. So it's an interesting way to live. But if the people around you are good people, then there's nothing better.
And you talk about it in the book, how you got, as a child, interested in it, and then went to school and eventually got to work in a lab. And you talk about an interesting character, I guess your assistant, right? Bill, you talk about him in the book. A lot of people kind of found that interesting as well, didn't they?
Right. So there's a guy named Bill that I've been working with for about 25 years. And I realized, you get to midlife and you look around and you say, what has my life been about? What was it all for? And you try to make sense of that. I think all people, get more reflective as they age. And Bill had been such a hero in my life. He's an unusual person. This is not somebody who's good with people and social, but he's like a lot of, I think there's Bills all over the world in all kinds of different walks of life. And that, he shows up. He shows up when it's not fun and when it's not easy, and he brings his own tools and he works hard, and there's no question of giving up. And I think those are the folks that really turn the gears that make things happen, and that's also true in science. And I really wanted to show that, show how important these invisible people are. And, so much about my job is standing up and telling people this is what we found and this is what we discovered, and writing it down in reports and et cetera. But it's the individual guy who's working hard in the background that I wasn't getting to tell that story, and so I put it in the book. And people seem to love it.
It's a solitary type of job, obviously. You spend a lot of time on your own, and Bill helping you out as well. But it's that type of job. You're not working with a bunch of people doing the same thing. So you have to enjoy kind of being alone doing it, don't you?
Well, you have to enjoy the everyday of it.
Right.
I do like I like that. I like being somewhere where you're supposed to be. I was always, kind of the person that I wanted somewhere to be. If we had vacations or holidays, I always liked having something to go do and be useful. I like to work, and I like to work at my own pace and use my hands, and I'm just happy when I'm kind of doing something. And so for me, it's been a really good life, and if that appeals to you, probably science has a good use for you.
Well, what have you learned most recently that you can tell us in the world of plants and trees? I know you kind of equate, which I found interesting, how trees and plants have some human elements to them in a sense, right, as far as survival goes, right?
Well, I think there's questions you can ask that the answer is yes. So one thing we worked on for years was, do trees have memory? Do they remember their childhood, so to speak? And I can ask you if you remember your childhood.
Most of it.
And, yeah, okay. But how do I prove that? Well, I have to prove that you took in information at one period of time, and that you can use that information and display it at a different later period of time, right? Because that's what memory is. And so if I ask that about a plant, about a tree, can it take in information and use that information at a much later point in time? The answer is yes. They have memory. We see that seeds, if we subject them to the cold and take their identical twins, same genetics, and don't expose them to the cold, that when they grow up as trees, the ones that were shown cold when they were seeds, they will act differently. They know things that somehow the ones that weren't exposed to cold don't know. And to me, that fits the bill in terms of the question, do they have memory? So do they do it the same way that we do? Do they have brains and nerves? And to be honest with you, we don't know that much about how you and I do it, but we're pretty sure it involves the brain. Right. So do they do it the same way that we do? Absolutely not. But do they do it? Do they remember in the strict sense of what that means? Absolutely yes. Isn't that neat?
Yeah, that's interesting when you think. I mean, obviously trees, plants, they're all living things. You don't think of them as having a brain or anything, but there's something built in, right, genetically, that it knows what to do, right? In the fall, it knows the leaves fall, and it knows see. And it's amazing when you look at seeds. How does that turn into a plant? How does that work?
Right, and that's the big challenge is when I talk to people. I want to talk to people. I don't want to talk to people that have been trained in this, where I can use the word endosperm and germinate and epigenetic and phenologic. I want I want to use words that you and I share to talk about these things that we've discovered. And so I have to use words like memory and know and choose, and the plants do this. But if I take time to explain it, and explain it in a way that hopefully holds your interest, I think we can find common ground, and we can tell those stories that otherwise only scientists get to hear. And that's been super rewarding part of letting the book out into the world.
I kind of think, and just from what I've read and keep up to date as much as I can, that a lot of the answers to diseases and health and all that are going to come from the plant world. I know a lot already do, but I think a lot more are out there that we don't know about. Would you think that's the case? I hope so.
There's an awful lot left to learn,
yeah.
and that learning is, in some ways it leads to new and better products and medicines and things like that. And in another way, I do a lot of teaching people how to learn. So I do these experiments with young people, and I teach them how to figure things out, how to solve problems, and then they go on to become your engineers and doctors and things like that. So I think the work that I do has a lot of usefulness in the short term, in the now term, and also in the term of, the more you know about the world, the more you feel like you're part of it. And my experience has shown me that people really need that. They need that meaning, and they have a longing for that. And people try to satisfy that by chasing money and power and things like that. But I try to encourage people to, you can feel so much bigger as a person just by knowing the names of the trees around you. It sounds like a simple thing. It sounds like a kind of overly simplistic, but I've seen it work. I've seen it in action. I've seen people grow.
Well, it's a fascinating book. Again, it's called Lab Girl. We've been talking with Hope Jahren today. And Hope, do you have a website you can direct people to get more information about the book?
Yes, you can get to it if you just Google Lab Girl. That's the name of the book. I was a very little girl in my father's lab, so that's how it all started.
There's also great stories in there about that. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Or you can Google my name. My name is a little unusual, so that's useful. My last name is Jahren, Jahren. If you just Google Hope Jahren, it'll get you to my website and the lab's website and photographs and the Twitter and the book and everything else.
Great. Well, Hope, it's been fun to talk to you. Hopefully we can do it again. I'm sure you're always writing in your job, so I'm guessing another book is in the works. But when it does, please keep in touch, and we'll have you back on again later.
Oh, it's going to take me a while to figure out what is. There was a real gap. I think we needed a book about scientists. And I think I knew how to tell those stories. And I'm not sure where the next gap is. What is the gap that I can fill somehow? That's going to take me a while to find. Well, but it sure is fun to think about.
You'll discover it, I know. Hope Jahren has been our guest. Great talking with you. Yep, good talking to you. Bye now.
I'm Stan Brock. 30 years ago, I formed Remote Area Medical to help people overseas. But then we found generations of families in America isolated by poverty from the health care they need. Together, we can take dental, vision, and medical help to 1 million adults and their kids, right here at home in the United States of America.
If you'd like to order the book we're talking about, please go to DougMilesMedia.com and enter the author's name in the Amazon search box. Thank you for listening. Please come back soon for more conversations here at DougMilesMedia.com. This has been a presentation of Doug Miles Media, all rights reserved. You can listen to or download previous programs at iTunes, Stitcher.com, or Doug Miles